Hey everyone, welcome back. Right now we'll cover session number 7, which is all about launching your cold email campaigns. Previously, we talked about, at a high level, what type of strategies would you want to implement for your campaigns, how to build a cold email list, write the respective copy. And now we're going to talk about actually what's the next step of putting everything into a campaign and launching it. So let's dive in. We have the following agenda. We're going to be talking about all the different platforms you can be utilizing, launching your first campaign, talking a little bit about spam laws because that's extremely timely with this day and age, and different types of campaigns you can run. So jump into cold email platforms. Fortunately for you now, there is a lot to choose from. This is just a quick list I've put together. As you can see, you have your options. One is not necessarily better than the other. All have their pros and cons, all have different audiences attached to it. So I'm going to stay away from really pinpointing and suggesting any for just various reasons because we have used maybe close to, I would say, 80% of the companies that you see on the in front of you on this list. What I can suggest is, some criteria that you should probably look at before making a decision. Like it says here, pick one that fits your budget because all of them have different price points at different team sizes and all of that type of stuff. Everyone has different questions on different ways to learn a new product. So you want to choose something that has support that kind of responds back in the timely manner that you'd want, and also in the respective language. Most of them really have good content, and they have a decent onboarding process. So you want to pick one that's the one that you're comfortable with. Also, like all of them have very different user interfaces, so you want to pick one that you're comfortable with as well from this perspective because you're going to be looking at it a lot. And then finally, like you want to choose one that has the features you need to run a successful campaign, and you'll slowly start to identify like what would you need to run one, right? We'll talk about certain things in this session, so that could be qualifying criteria for you to choose one platform versus another because not all of them will have the respective features. So I hope this is helpful on you making a decision. So let's jump into talking about certain settings you need to know when setting up your cold email platform. I'm going to assume that, okay, at this point, you know which cold email platform you want, you've set it up, your Gmail or G Suite account is connected to it, and all of that type of stuff. But let's talk about some settings which I know a lot of people often overlook. So the first thing you want to really decide is if you're using G Suite or Outlook. And you also want to make sure that you have your burner domains and emails and warm-up tools set up, and then you connect everything to your cold email platform. I think like this is a given. We covered all of these concepts earlier in quite some detail. I think the first thing I see a lot of people messing up is they don't set a sender name on the cold email platform. And a sender name is literally when you receive an email, the name you see, right? If you're using a cold email platform, it should take the sender name from your respective inbox, but double check because sometimes it doesn't. So really make sure that you're able to get this, and when you're synchronizing your accounts, that's usually where this setting should be. Another thing I see a lot of people, they just don't understand it, is everything around sending limits. You have something called an email limit and then a campaign limit. So an email limit is how many emails you can send out per account, and a campaign limit is how much you can send out in that respective campaign, right? So G Suite has the limit of sending 2,000 emails a day. Outlook, from what I saw, has 10,000, and if you're doing your own server, then you need to check with that respective provider. Generally, what we recommend is you want to send maybe around 100 to 200 a day per G Suite account once it's warmed up. On Outlook, roughly the same. You don't want to be hitting the top end of those limits, right? That's the reason why we set up burner domains and emails type of infrastructure. And the campaign limits will help you really prioritize certain campaigns. So the way you need to think about it is like, hey, if I have 4 or 5 campaigns I want to run, okay, let me give campaigns A, B, and C a higher limit of, let's say, 100 a day, because I want those to go out first, versus campaigns 5, 6, and 7. I'll give them a lower limit because those are not as high of a priority. So really understand like the limits, because that will help you prioritize which campaigns need to go out. Email sending delays. This is a pretty interesting item. So the whole now notion of email sending is, I think Woodpecker was the first cold email platform. I'm not 100% sure that started this, and then a lot of these other ones started to adopt it as well. At least Woodpecker was the first place I heard that do this. It's called a randomized sending interval for them. And what this does is that, you know, because cold email platforms automate the actual sending from the inbox, the sending intervals between one email send versus another, it'll randomize that interval in between. So, so it looks more human, because if you're sending out an email every 5 minutes, it looks obviously very robotic, and Google will pick up on that and then most probably shut down the account. So having a randomized sending interval setting in there would be super helpful. Some platforms have it there by default, so you definitely want to check with support to see if it's something natively there already. Uh, so generally, what I say is like, hey, put a delay of like 3 to 4 minutes, and then randomize it as well. If it's not randomized, then you probably want to keep it the same, but you know, you really play around with the numbers to see what suits you the best, but you just want to have something in place there. A newer feature which I've seen come up fairly recent is this whole notion of throttling. And what throttling means is that you don't want to add all your prospects to a campaign at once. So let's say if you have 100 contacts, 100 contacts won't be added to the first step. Instead, on day one, it will add 50 on day two, and let those 50 start the sequence. On day two, it'll add another 50. Day three, it'll add another 50. What this does is it's better for deliverability, because that way you have actual individuals going through your campaign, rather than having like chunks of people jump into the first step and then they're going through the campaign, and all at this different times, right? So this gives an easier way for a large amount of prospects enter your sequence, and they're actually going through the entire sequence, rather than having like you add 100 is in step one, then another 100 is in step two, then another 100 is step three, right? So this gives a little bit more variability in your email and shows that you're sending different types of emails, right? So this is offered on some platforms only. So again, you'd want to check with the respective cold email provider if they do this, right? Um, this is on one of the providers what it looks like, but usually it's in the campaign settings or on the email settings, and like, you know, you'd want to make sure you set those settings up. Another thing which I see a lot of individuals don't taking more advantage of is something called an exclusion list, or do not contact list, or an opt-out list, right? Um, I think this is a great feature to have in any product, and make sure you take full advantage of it. There's various groups you want to be adding to this. I'll walk through all of them. So the first one is you want to make sure that you add your existing customers, or at least their domains. The reason is you don't want to be doing any outreach to your existing customers for obvious reasons. The second bucket is like you want to look at any previous marketing campaigns that have run out, or any outbound campaigns, and add those contacts there, because those are people who have already opted out. Again, if you have that list, just throw that in there. Another thing is you probably want to not outreach to any of your competitors, so throw your competitors in there. Any deals that you've lost or you're actively been working on, throw that into a list, and then upload it into your cold email platform. And then lastly, any of your own like professional network first degrees or second degrees, which you already know, you want to make sure that they're included in your do not opt out list. The reason you want to take all these measures is because this will act like a very good safety net. And in case you're building lists with automated tools or VAs and stuff, that way you don't have to go through your entire list and just remove any people that you know that you definitely don't want to talk to. I found this will save a lot of time, especially from the list building side. This way you can just go delegate list building or build a list using these tools, and then run the campaigns knowing that, hey, I have all these parameters in place. So the people that I don't want to contact will not be contacted. Another feature which is really used for open and click tracking is this whole thing on like CNAME records. They're called click tracking pixels and all of that type of stuff. So some platforms have it, some don't. Essentially, what you need to do is set up a subdomain on your record, on your domain, and then pointed towards a specific URL, right? It's called setting a CNAME record. Again, some platforms support it. They should have the respective supporting docs. This helps with their respective deliverability setting. It's fairly easy to set up. You can do it using the DNS records. Just some thoughts on like before you actually do launch a campaign, what are some things you need to consider? Is like definitely assess all your deliverability parameters and make sure that everything is set up. Consider geography when you're doing the respective scheduling. I know some cold email platform supports local time zones. So, you don't want to be reaching out to people in East Coast under a Pacific time zone setting. So make sure that you have that sorted out. Consider your max email limits, because what will end up happening is you're prospecting someone and then that burner email will get burnt or fried, and then you have to reactivate it. So just make sure that you're operating within the limits. Finally, you definitely want to track all your stats. This is important just to also just know that at least my campaign is up and running, things are working, and all that type of stuff. Consider which accounts are being put into which campaigns, right? So are you running campaigns that are specific to East Coast? Are you running campaigns specific to an industry like pharma versus banking versus retail? So you want to design your campaigns around, I guess, those respective parameters. Last thing is, again, some cold email platforms have this natively built in, but like consider public holidays. If you know a public holiday is coming up, the easiest way is to just jump into the platform and switch off a campaign for a couple days. And then some platforms have holiday exclusions already included. So just something to consider. Let's talk about spam laws because this comes up quite a bit. There's a number of laws in place. One of them is called Castle, which is specific for Canada, GDPR, which is more EU, Can Spam, which is Canadian as well. Sorry, Castle is for North America. CCPA is, I think, California, something Privacy Act. There's an article I've linked there for each one of the cold email platforms have a very long form article about this. You can read the article linked there to like get into the nitty gritty. Um, Generally, cold email it's a legal channel for you to prospect, but I would say just to be on the safe side, you need to be doing two, three things that to make sure you're in the clear. The first one I would say is that you need to include an unsubscribe text or link in the end of your emails. Then keep track of all your opt-outs so you don't do the respective outreach. If somebody asks you for whatever reason that where you got their contact information from, just put that like, hey, I use this service. They have your contact information. If you want to opt out, contact them. Right. And I think the last but not least is probably the most important thing is like always ensure that there is some business context and relevancy. Because if you're just doing outreach for the sake of it, you're going to get a lot of angry people and you're going to get a high amount of unsubscribes. Right. So just something to keep into consideration. Uh, for unsubscribed texts, I find that for some reason a lot of individuals mess this up, or like you see that and like you already know that looks spammy. I think there's if your cold email platform allows it, customize the unsubscribe text. So this is the one we utilize at our agency, which I think is really great. It's like, hey, from your LinkedIn profile, I thought you'd be someone worth connecting with. If you think this email is not valuable or relevant, click here and it goes out to the opt-out page, right? That gives a little bit of transparency up front. Be like, hey, I was on LinkedIn, I saw your profile, I got your email, and I wanted to do the outreach, right? And if the person's not interested, they go and click there. The disadvantage of not having an opt-out link is that your reply rate will go through the roof and you're going to have a bunch of people saying unsubscribe, 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 and it's going to mess up your stats. So just put the unsubscribe link there along with some text. Let's move on to different type of campaigns you can be running, right? So typical campaign that's only email, right? This is what we would do. You know, it's 7 steps over 21 days. It's 3 value propositions. Each value proposition has a follow up with a breakup email towards the end slash keep in touch, right? This is a typical campaign. It's kind of like a baseline to kind of see how things are going. Everyone's going to have their own school of thought around this. Again, you need to be experimenting, but if you want to start off with somewhere, get this. This is something you can, I guess, use and action straight away. Um, you know, it's only 3 value props, and with each with they have their own respective follow-ups. uh, I'm not a big fan of like sending out like 3 emails in the first week and then giving them back, giving a gap, and then hitting another 3 emails the other week and stuff. So I've seen all sorts of sequence structures. I think from our research and from what we do internally, this is the easiest to start implementing straight away, and then you iterate on as you get the data. Be like, hey, maybe I need to present my value props earlier rather than later, right? And we'll talk about different types of campaigns you can run, which we call playbooks, towards the end of the course. um, yeah, and then a quick tip here, I thought like you definitely want to be running different types of experiments to see how much of a gap there is between steps. uh, there's no golden rule here. I've seen some people say like, "Hey, wait 1 day, wait 3 days, wait 5 days." The key thing is you just want to make sure that you keep following up, because you know people are busy, and you want to make sure that you stay top of mind, right? Truly think it will change per persona, so just kind of keep that in mind. You know, besides the traditional campaign of like, "Hey, let me just go launch a campaign to my prospects," there are other types of campaigns you could do, right? So one of them, which I think a lot of people end up not doing, is, you know, let me go to my previous campaign and see all the people who opened my email and not replied. Let me segment this cohort of individuals and put them into another campaign and re-engage them and re-nurture them, right? The other thing is like, hey, let me go and check my old inbound leads, or all the individuals who were closed last time but didn't end up closing, right? Let me go retarget them and put them in a whole nother new campaign, and this will be a retargeting campaign, right? And there's can be just a general like all the individuals who said like, hey, now's not a good time, reach out to me in 3 to 4 months, like put them all in another campaign, and then you can launch that. Moving on, I get asked a lot, what are the typical results I should see in some of these campaigns, right? So I just wanted to throw up some stats for you for reference purposes. Again, these are all going to change depending on all the different variabilities. But you know, if you're getting an open rate of around 40% on your cold email campaigns, that's decent. You know, like ideally you want to aim for 50 to 60%, which is on the higher side, but that's really what you want to be going for. Average open rates across the industry, you're looking at like 20 to 25%. That's for marketing on cold email, just because a lot of people are just doing it poorly. And I guarantee you, if you do the things that we talked about earlier in this course, such as burner domains, warm up, get the copy in sync, you'll have much better open rates than majority of the individuals out there. Um, you typically want to aim for a reply rate of around 5%. Again, this is a mixture of like interested and not interested. But if a lot of people are not replying back, then that clearly shows that your messaging is not resonating at all with this persona. So I mean, getting them to respond back saying they're not interested, it's just way, way, way off, right? If they respond back and saying they're not interested, that means that the messaging makes sense, but just the I guess the value proposition wasn't compelling enough, right? So something to consider there. After that is the interested rate. You know, typically we look at 1%. If you're able to get an interested rate of about 2%, you know, you're doing something decently right. And if you get anywhere close to 5%, then you know, okay, fine, this is like really something here, right? Those are some benchmarks for you to kind of like operate and work on. One of the things that comes up quite a bit now in cold outreach is this whole notion of going omni-channel. And if you do go omni-channel, you will be able to increase your conversion. So I just wanted to add some tips here because I know it's been coming up. We'll cover a little bit more in detail when we hit the playbook section. But you know, one of the things you can do is all the people that you're doing outreach to, you can also add them on LinkedIn, which could facilitate overall conversion, right? All the people who responded but started to ghost, you could call them and be like, hey, you said you were interested. What happened? Why didn't you book that meeting? Or like, why are you ghosting? You don't want to ask verbatimly why you're ghosting, but you definitely want to get them on the phone and start doing a decent job of asking great questions, right? I've seen some individuals also mix up some things with direct mail, right? Sending things to people in their homes or offices, and then using cold email to do the respective follow up. This is usually for like bigger accounts where the deal sizes are very large. But the whole idea is like you do want to think of things beyond cold email just to make sure that somebody pays attention. uh, just a final tip before we wrap things up, but I would highly recommend that you create your own mini checklists that outlines everything around your process, especially before you launch a campaign. And this is what it looks like for us at a very high level. You can like flesh this out and add more bullet points, but like, you know, let's check the domain settings. Is everything good? Is it warmed up? Are the DNS records in there? Let's go through the platform. Did we set up all the appropriate limits, record, CNAME records, and all that type of stuff? Did we QA the contact data before we upload it? Okay, let's review the copy and add it to the sequence. Let's preview the copy and make sure that everything is formatted. Maybe send a test email internally, right? Again, then check all the sequence settings and look at the sending schedule, which emails are we sending from, all of that type of stuff. Then do one quick final review, and then you're ready to launch. So I think it's really handy having a checklist like this, especially if you're working in a team, because then you'll 100% be sure that, okay, we've reviewed everything in detail and nothing's going to go out without the appropriate guidelines or appropriate information. And that's it for this session. Thank you so much, and we'll see you in the next one. All right, take care.